Hi, everyone, and welcome to El Camino People, the podcast. Today, with us, we have a pilgrim that many of you probably know. Many of them probably don't know that you are the person behind the face and those books, but we are gladly welcoming here to Michael, the face of Wise Pilgrim Guides. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon.
It is funny because we really met this summer, and a lot of people, I think it happens with the same, like with me, in the Camino people at the beginning, I never post a picture of myself. I never post anything. And in your case, I don't even know if there's one picture of you in your Instagram or in your account.
Um, Not to my knowledge. I certainly haven't posted anything of myself. I think a few people have tagged me from some projects that I've done over the last couple of years, but yeah, no, nothing in the books, nothing in the app. I kind of hide in the shadows, if you will.
So finally, we welcome here the actual face behind the Wise Pilgrim Guides. It's been so many years. You've been like, when was the first guide release?
Let's see. Well, the first the first app, because I started with
With the
apps,
apps.
was released in 2012. So we're
Wow,
on
9 years
9 years
ago.
now, the ninth edition. Yeah,
Not bad.
yeah, yeah. Not bad at all.
So well, a little things have changed probably since then in the world of as Camino apps and technology. I'm like, I will guess, what kind of mobile phones we were using in 2012. I'm like, we're probably the first release of the iPhones and stuff like that.
It was certainly the first release of the iPhone that inspired the move, um,
Hmm.
because prior to the apps, I had a website. The Wise Pilgrim website
Hmm.
has been around for, I think, 2008 is when I started it. I was living in Iceland at the time, and I needed a hobby, and I had piles and piles of notebooks from the Camino, and so I said, let's learn how to make some websites, and I made this thing, which I thought would be,
What did you use for website? Was that HTML or
it was Drupal.
Drupal? So you were one of the
Yeah,
first early adopters of Drupal.
yeah, Drupal at the time. I think it was Drupal 4, and I'm in 7 now, because it is still Drupal. The
I
whole
know, I
thing
know.
was
I check it.
powered.
I was looking at your website, and I'm like, I design websites too. So I was like, what is this made of? I'm like, this doesn't look like WordPress or Joomla, and I'm like, Drupal, and it's
Drupal,
not
yeah.
that many people design websites in Drupal in Spain. It's not really common, more in the States, but here Drupal hasn't make it yet.
I'm not sure that it's the best solution,
I don't
but
know.
at the time it worked, and it was something to learn how to do. And I thought, being the optimist that I was, that it would be a really great tool for pilgrims. Completely overlooking the fact that at the time, any pilgrim on the Camino had no internet. There was nothing for them until the phones came around, and that's what really made me go, hang on, I've got this information, let's put it in their pocket now. And so that was my first endeavor. And of course, I'm not a programmer, so it took a little longer than it ought to have, but
I don't know. Even
we got
programmers are programmers. They just people that know how to look for code on Google. I always say that to my brother. He's a coder. And I like, I don't like coding. I have my peaks with programming. I'm an engineer, but I hate coding. So anyway, I think we are getting more into the technology. I think we'll do another podcast about the backgrounds of the Wise Pilgrims. But as you know, we always start with the 1 minute questionnaire. So as you know, is the whole idea is an icebreaker to get you going and getting back to that Camino memories, and to get as many questions as you can. There's about 40. Nobody has ever made it the whole 40, I have to say. I don't know if it's hard or people think too much, but here they go.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I lost you
I
there for a
know.
second.
So
Okay.
I was saying that the questionnaire, the whole idea is to do an icebreaker. So 40 questions. Nobody has ever even got close to 20. So we'll see how far you can go. Remember, whatever comes to your mind, don't overthink it. Don't stop. The whole idea is just get going. Are you ready?
Okay. Yep.
Let's go. First Camino.
2003.
How many Caminos?
Too many to count.
Ultrella or Susella?
Utreya.
One month to walk.
September.
Albergue de Donativo.
As in my favorite.
Albergue de Donativo.
Grañón.
One city.
Boadilla.
One meal.
lentejas all day.
A song.
Here Comes the Rain Again.
A happy moment.
Anytime I'm taking off my boots.
One color.
Gold.
A smell.
A smell. Strange shampoo.
Fisterra or Muxía?
Muxía.
Very well, not bad. I think probably I need to probably start launching a page on the website, and who has gone the farthest, like the guys in the car. So with the questionnaires and the timing.
How many did I get there? What was the
I think about 15.
Oh, all right. That's not too bad.
Not too bad. Lentejas, really?
Oh man, so I don't know if you know this or not, but my mother is Spanish. So I grew up, although in Ohio, with many Spanish meals, and lentejas was the thing that she made me eat as a child, which now I make on my own regularly.
I love lentejas, but when I think about the Camino, I'm like, lentejas. But that's the beauty of this. A lot of people, they bring memories, they bring whatever. And for you, that the first thing you thought was lentejas.
Yeah. It's great. It's great fuel. It keeps you going.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. Like gets you going. It has all the proteins, it has everything, and plus you cannot add anything to the lentejas. It's like pizza or pasta. You can put whatever you have leftovers on the fridge, and it will work.
And in the average small town restaurant, it's also the thing that's really hard to mess up. Yeah, everyone can make a pretty decent lenteja. So yeah.
So let's go to the story of Michael and Wise Pilgrim. So tell us. I always start with the same question: how did you find out about the Camino de Santiago? Coming from a man from Spain, living in Ohio, how did you find out about the Camino de Santiago the first time?
You know what? That's a question that I've always struggled with, because I don't remember the answer to that question. I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time, recently out of university. And somehow, and I don't know how, it came up on my radar. And I thought, wow, this is a very interesting thing. This was 2003, so it wasn't really mainstream. The Way wasn't out. Paulo Coelho had a book, but nobody was really talking about the Camino. Yeah. But sort of eager to get out of the Midwest, I thought this is a great opportunity to get back to Spain, to practice some Spanish. And at the time I was running a photography studio, and I spoke to the owner. I said, listen, I need some holiday time. And he thought it was a great idea. Rather than sort of shoo me away, he actually financed the trip. My Christmas bonus as a Christmas bonus, he used his air miles and sent me to Spain for 28 days. Now, what I didn't know at the time was that 28 days was a very short period to get all the way across for the Camino. Yeah.
But another thing that a lot of people, they don't get it, if you haven't lived in the States, is in the States, you have 4 weeks, and having more than 2 weeks at a time of vacation is almost impossible. So it's not like in Spain that you can really take a month or whatever. It's not common in the States unless you have been fired, changing your job, or you're a teacher. There's no way you can have such a long period.
That's exactly it. And so the following year was the year that somebody first asked me, hey, how'd you hear about the Camino? So when you ask me it now and I don't know the answer, I didn't know it in 2004 either. So to this day, it was a reference. It must have been in a book or a TV show, or I really don't know, but it bit hard, and I haven't really been able to shake it ever since. And of course, now I live 300 meters from the Camino. So,
and nothing related with your mom, like being from Spain, never anything come out from the Camino?
No, that was, of course, a selling point, because I could come and catch up with my aunts and things like that, with family and whatnot. But it was more like an opportunity to go back to Spain and spend a summer here, spend a full month doing something cheap. I was just out of college, so I needed something affordable, and in a part of Spain that I wasn't too familiar with. My family is from the Castilla-La Mancha area. So being in the north was a treat. And that's
there you go. Finally, you stop everything and jump into your Camino and decided to do the Camino Frances.
Yeah. I had, I started in Roncesvalles because at the time there wasn't any really good means to get across the pass to Saint-Jean. And there wasn't for several years. So many of my early Caminos, I'd never even crossed the border into France.
Still, it's not even super easy. Like from Pamplona, there is only one bus that goes over there, and if not, you have to grab a taxi. So it's not even, one of the things that I always struggle being in Pamplona is like, why we don't have a better way to get to Saint John? But
at the time, you didn't have a great way to get to Roncesvalles either.
You can walk.
Yeah. Well, that's in a way what I did. And I don't know if I told you this story last summer, but the people at Pamplona always hold a special place in my heart, because my very first night in your fair city, I arrived really late. The albergue was closed. There's a much different one than there is now. And I decided to sort of just camp out on a bench in the middle of town for lack of having any real plan, because as you'll learn, I really don't have much of a plan. And this gentleman about your age strolls by and he says, "Hey, you can't really sleep there, but you're welcome to come with me. I've got a sofa." And I thought, all right, well, what's the worst that can happen, right? We're in Pamplona.
For the ones that don't know, in those days in Pamplona, there were like bad things going on. Like Pamplona has been a place with a lot of, terrorism. I live here. I have 2 bombs under my house. And like, it wasn't one of the things that you have to be careful at night where you go, or things can, not that it's going to happen every day, but sometimes, there was big struggles with the police and the.
Well, I can tell you, I think that this gentleman, wherever he is, knew that there was a risk involved, and that's why he took me in. And him and his girlfriend prepared dinner, a great night's sleep, and in the morning he drove me to the bus station, only to realize that the bus was many hours away. And so he said, I've got a better plan. And he drives me to the edge of town where I can stick out my thumb and catch a lift to Roncesvalles. And that's exactly what I did. And it became sort of my Camino ritual. I would always arrive to Pamplona, walk myself to the edge of town, hitchhike to Roncesvalles, and whenever I got there, whatever time it was, turn around and start walking west again. And it all started with a late night arrival in Pamplona and a terrible bus schedule. Yeah.
Incredible, the ways of the Camino. So how was the Camino at the time, in 2003, going to Roncesvalles? Were you walking, I guess, during the summer or times, or?
It was. And I can tell you that Camino, 2003, it was July of 2003, because I arrived in Santiago for the feast. I don't know if you remember 2003, but there was a massive heat wave across Spain and France. And it was devastating. I can remember, I think that day I probably started walking out of Roncesvalles in the late afternoon. And by that point, it was well into the high 30s. And I thought to myself, if I've got to do this for another month, I'm never going to survive. I must have laid down for a rest a half a dozen times, just completely wrecked by the sun. And of course, we learned the pilgrims that I met that day were the ones that I walked most of the way with. They were the stragglers, right? If I'm starting at 2:00 in the afternoon and so are they, then we're sort of kindred spirits already. And yeah, so we walked most of the way. The Camino back then, okay, right? It's in its essence, it's unchanged. But with regards to how pilgrims walked and how they organized themselves, it was a much different scenario. There's no such thing as what albergue are you going to? It was, where are you going? Because you knew that wherever you said, there was only one place for pilgrims. Whether it was Burgos.
Were you guys over SMS? Because no WhatsApp, no Facebook.
Oh, no.
Not anything like that.
It was analog. You would because, well, there was no towns with more than one albergue. So if you knew kind of where the person was going, you could check on them. But if somebody said, "Hey, we're going to be in San Sol for the night," and you got there and you couldn't find them, you checked the message board. There was the message boards.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
The cork board, and they would have left you a note that said, "Hey, we didn't really like this place, so we went down to Torres del Rio. See you at the bar." And that's the way it worked at the time. of course, I think WhatsApp is a much better way of communicating with pilgrims
But
nowadays.
I love, we should walk, I would love to do 1 year an analog Camino. Just,
Oh,
that
for
would be pretty
sure.
funny.
For sure. And, the only drawback to doing it is your inability to really stay in touch with people. But that kind of speaks to our own needs, doesn't it? Because you don't need
Not really.
to be in constant contact with all of the people around you. You like to. It's a good feeling, but you can absolutely do a Camino without a phone. As I'm the guy selling phone apps, maybe I shouldn't say that too loud. But yeah,
But you also have the book, no?
Yeah. I do. I have the book, and if I'm entirely honest with myself and pilgrims, neither are strictly necessary to walk the Camino. The truth of the matter is that I provide, out of my own passion for the Camino, something that other people find a need for, but it isn't a strict need. Any more than carrying a toothbrush is a strict need. It's a handy thing to have, and if in a pinch you need it, it's great. But the Camino gives so many more opportunities to find your own way.
And that's what I love about talking with people that have businesses in the Camino like you, that we know that our way of doing business is not for everyone. It's just there to support health for the ones that need it. But we have done it without books, without apps, without guides, without anyone that teaching us how to do Camino. We're just here out of love and just providing something extra that a lot of people find super helpful, because your books and your guides have been found really helpful for many. So I guess you are doing something well.
I think so. And I think myself and the other very few guidebook authors out there are we cut from the same cloth. We approach it from the same viewpoints. When I walked in 2003, there wasn't a lot of choices for guidebooks, and there certainly weren't any that had photos in them.
It was the only all gurus of the Camino. I don't think there was anything else at the time. No,
we had the A4 folded A4 laminated guide from the CSJ, Alison Raju, that wrote that. And then there was a company called Pili Pala Press that did some black and white, a really nice book, actually, a well done book. But there wasn't a market for it, at least a business opportunity for it. And there hasn't ever been.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting rich off of writing Camino guidebooks. Yeah. It's just something that we've always done. Like when I started the website, as a way to stay connected, right? As long as I'm collecting information about the Camino, and as long as I'm in contact with hospitaleros, I'm sort of still in the Camino. Which now that I'm in Spain is a different sensation. But for many years, I wasn't in Spain. I was living abroad. I was in Ohio, or I was in Iceland. And you miss it. You miss the generosity that comes with the Camino. And in many ways, that generosity, that giving, is what steered me towards a career path in hospitality, which was what I did for about a decade in Iceland. So I was sort of living these dual lives of being a host myself, but not on the Camino, and then in the evening, sort of compiling information that would help people on the Camino. And, it's been 18 years now, and it's only now grown into something which is viable on its own. Well, in a non-pandemic environment, yes, it can hold its own. But
how was the Michael that coming from Ohio? You did your first Camino, you finished the Camino. How did it change you?
Well, for one, my Spanish improved enormously. I learned a few things about myself on that trip that I don't think you can really learn in places that don't really physically challenge you. When I mentioned that I had 28 days, it was 28 days to get from Madrid to Roncesvalles to finish there and back to Madrid. And it wasn't until I was...
You walk only, what, like 24 days?
Yeah.
So you did what is expected to be done in about 36 in 24. Not bad.
Yeah. And I didn't... the kicker is I didn't know that I didn't have enough time because, like I said, guidebooks really didn't spell it out for you. And so it wasn't until I was in Leon that I realized that I was
I
going,
have to speed up.
yeah. So I learned, one, I'm a lot more capable than I ever thought I was. You know, I speak as if it's something in the past. I am a scrawny character. I was never very athletic or anything like that, but the Camino really sort of turned that around for me, and the ability to sort of join 2 days into one and just do it. Just, you know, if it was at the end of the day, heel to toe, trying to get to the pillow that was somewhere off in the distance. That's what I did. And that was a great thing for me to learn about myself. You know, you sort of go at it with this romantic notion of, I'm going to walk across Spain. And that inspires you, but it also terrifies you. It also sort of makes you go, are you maybe biting off more than you can chew here? Is this the best idea? Maybe you should, you know, pick something smaller. But I didn't, thankfully, and I stuck with it. And thankfully, when I returned to Ohio, I had just the right amount of friends to sort of put up with my Camino stories. And in fact, convinced one of them to return the following year. And that it was he that sort of kept the ball rolling. I don't know that I would have come back if I didn't have a friend who was in a position to sort of need something like the Camino. And then the following year, a different friend, you know, and it just sort of kept repeating. And it became something that I could sort of share with friends as a giving experience, and they all got something completely different out of it. And every time I did it, I got something out of it. And I think it was probably around year 3 that I realized you're going to be around this for a while. That's when I started taking more notes and really being a lot more observant about what was going on around me.
So the first day you weren't one of those that were writing everything, you know, journaling every day out, or?
No, it took me 3 years to sort of get to that point. I certainly went with that ambition, as we all do. We all sort of
I try once.
Notebook.
That's it.
Yeah.
Over there is my little book. I think it's one page written. I'm not a writer. I'm sorry.
And you're not alone. And it doesn't have anything to do with not being a writer or a blogger.
No, it's just the mood or whatever.
You get to Spain and you get to the trail, and there are so many things that you can't even imagine that await you. You know, later on in my years, I became a tour guide on the Camino, working for some of these companies that bring groups along. And the question you get asked is, how do I train for the Camino? You know, everybody wants to know, like, should I get a backpack? Should I fill it with rocks? Or what kind of boots should I go up in my local mountains with? I say, you know, all that stuff is really good. And it helps to have boots which are not brand new.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, the Camino is going to train you pretty quickly in ways that you can't really prepare for. You know, you can't prepare for the jet lag or the lost luggage in Barajas. And you can't prepare for the fact that, you know, all your little practicing of Spanish is not going to mean anything when you land in Navarra, you know, or that the food has more salt, so your body's doing funny things with hydration because you're in the sun and hiking, and like all of that sort of takes a mental and physical toll that you can't prepare for. But which, you know, by the time you get a few days into it, Pamplona or beyond, you found your groove. You've sort of found a rhythm, and people will ask you on subsequent Caminos. You know, you start on Camino 3, right? You start in Roncesvalles, and people say, "How far do you walk in a day?" And you say, "Oh, sometimes I walk 30 kilometers," and their eyes sort of bulge out of their head, like, "How do you do that?" And I said, "Well, it's because I've done it, and you will too." And they look at me like, "No, I'll never do 30 kilometers." But
on my second day, we walk all the way to Pamplona, because when we were coming down from Roncesvalles, we saw 3 girls from the States that were with a little backpack. It's like, "Oh, we are going to Pamplona for tapas." And I was going with a girl from Chicago, another one from England, and another couple guys. We were creating like the small little Camino family first day, and they were like, we can do it too. I'm like, if you want, is Thursday in Pamplona. That means that, on Thursday is Juevincho, so you get beer and tapa for €2. I'm like, if you want, we can make it, and we can make it. So on the second day, we walked from Roncesvalles to Pamplona.
Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, and I slept in my bed and woke up the next morning, and that was the weirdest way. So when someone asks me, what is the weirdest thing of your first Camino? First day is St. John, second day Roncesvalles, third day my house.
Right.
But
you did it.
Yeah.
And you did it in good, and you did it in good company, and that a lot of times makes a big difference.
And that's a whole thing where you were saying, you will find people that fits with you in a way. I always say, I don't know why. There's so many people. If you do the Camino Frances in the summer, there's a lot of people. It's not crowded. That's one of the myths of the Camino. It will be crowded when you ride to Finisterre with Sarria or something. But even though, you will find the people that kind of like surrounds you, that flies around you, and you will get together. I don't even know how, but I don't know how was with you with your little Camino family the first time.
It was exactly that way. I had with me, we were only four. One, two, three. No, we were five including myself. It was a very small group. A few came, a few left. Now, we weren't so many to begin with. If there was 20 people at the albergue at the end of the day, that was quite a lot. But we absolutely, how do I say this? We meshed. We got along. Yep. We all had a typical sense of humor. It was a Danish poet and firefighter, an Australian, an American couple that was living in Belgium and spending their summer in the Alps or in the Pyrenees. And every dinner was a hoot. Every morning was a laugh riot. Nobody wanting to get up. Remind you, because of that heat wave, we would wake up at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
To sort of get as many hours under our belts as we could before you really couldn't walk much more. And the funny part about it is when I realized in Leon that I was well behind schedule, it occurred to me, I've got to leave these people. Mm-hmm. I've walked half the Camino with them now, but I can't go at this pace. And that sort of taught me another lesson, because when I left Leon and started doubling up my stages or doing 1.5 stages, you ruck up to the albergue and it's the same people, not exactly the same, but the same personalities, the same kindred spirits that you can mesh with. And so this idea of a Camino family, I think, one, we didn't have that word back then. It didn't. Nobody referred to it as that, but it's sort of done a disservice to pilgrims along the way who feel like they need to have.
They need to have it. Yeah, I agree with you. And that's one of the things that now, thinking back of my Camino, I thought, I find my Camino probably around, I think probably by Logroño, we were kind of like a big family with a couple other families that we will, back and forth with them. But that's one of the things that I think a lot of times, if I was walking by myself every day, trying to look for different groups, how will be my Camino? And I think, as you said, that a lot of people now expect that to find that family that you have to go 30 days with. And it's amazing, don't get me wrong, but because we have our own time, we have time with different people. It's not like you walk all the time or stay all day with them, but it is one of those things that has been created in the Camino that's kind of like a must,
Yeah. And I don't, for all of its charms, and it certainly is charming, and it is very romantic, it becomes a limiting factor. You don't talk to as many people. For many of my early Caminos, I was walking with a friend. And when I started walking alone, the dynamic completely changed.
Yeah, it's like when people ask me, to do the Camino alone, walking, running, biking, I'm like, they're all amazing. They're all different. But if you have to experience the Camino in his big, meaning, walking the Frances is the closest one you're going to get to the big picture.
Absolutely. And it draws a broader sort of demographic, a wider swath of humanity it brings to Spain. I think a lot of the other routes, they're sort of changing nowadays.
They're changing now because there's a lot of, investment also in making them the new Frances. But as I say, if you go, I went to the Portuguese, the coastal, and that one, the crowd is much older. A lot of people, that is the second, the third, the fourth Camino. When you go to the Norte, it's more backpackers. You find more that kind of like, backpacking feeling of people that wants to backpack, not looking more for the Camino. Via de la Plata is for the more into our age, looking for a whole year or month and a half of just loneliness. And it's just, but I was just, in the interview from today, we talked with Sven, a guy from Germany, and we were putting people in each Camino, and each Camino has its own different crowd or moment in your life. So, and I think that's the cool thing. But starting in the Francesa, this thing is the one that opens up all the other ones.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
So, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, after you.
No, I was gonna keep going on like how the first, your friends and family, everyone over there in Ohio that hasn't heard about the Camino knew that you were half a Spaniard, but you're right over there. You start chit chatting all day, nonstop, talking about this Camino de Santiago. What they told you? And probably, I'm like being a photographer at the time, I guess no books, but you will have a ton of pictures from those years.
No,
not really.
I don't.
Wow.
No, because here's the interesting part about it. It was, I studied photography at university, and when I walked my first Camino, I was still shooting film. So
I'm one of those style. I used to, have a little laboratory over there. What are you, Nikon or Canon?
I was a Mamiya shooter, actually. Wow. I shot medium formats, which is interesting because this year it's something that I'm coming back to with the exact same camera. So I traveled the first Camino with a medium format camera and a limited selection of film because it's heavy.
Not probably easy also to find in Spain at the time, and also in the Camino, there's no way you have to buy any film.
No, you had to bring it all. And so I have precious few photos of that trip. Many of the second trip. At the second trip, I wised up and bought a small little point and shoot. So I didn't have much to show my family and to my friends. But of course, you come back with a month full of stories. Now, as you know, when you leave to go on a trip and you return, the place that you return to hasn't really changed much relative to your own.
It is incredible.
And so not everyone is ready to hear, Camino, because you're so excited about it and you want to share like just the knowledge of it. Like, guys, do you know that this thing exists? Can you even imagine the ability to just sort of walk out of a hostel and just follow arrows the whole way? And it at the time they couldn't imagine it. Now it's a bit more mainstream. There's movies about it. So it's a thing that people can wrap their heads around. But at the time, my friends were endlessly patient with me. They were always keen to hear some stories. But one of them in particular, whom I've known since I was 5, said, you know what? That sounds interesting enough that I would like to do it too. And he just so happened to be in a position where he was leaving the U.S. military for medical reasons and needed something like this. And he did it. And that sort of led credibility to my whole enamoration with.
That wasn't just one crazy guy. It was 2 crazy guys.
That's right. And he's generally less crazy than me and, a smart guy. So my parents sort of looked at it like, well, if Nate's doing it, then okay.
So is that friend the one that if you go with him, your parents trust you to go anywhere?
That's right. That's exactly it. And the inverse was true of me for him. His parents would say, well, if you're going with Michael, then is there anybody else going? These kinds of things. And so that second trip sort of made it. Yeah.
Did you repeat the Camino Frances, the second trip with Nate?
Yeah. Step for step. And interestingly enough, that's sort of, because this world is so small, you're constantly bumping into people. Now, mind you, at that time, I'd only done one Camino, but he and I would be walking through villages and people would wave at me like they'd known me because many of them recognized me. I don't know how. And it was around maybe a week into it. He says, do you know everybody on this trip? Like, do all these, how is it that everyone knows?
This is Spain. Yeah, we know everyone here.
This is Spain. Yeah. Don't you know But there were people on the first trip that sort of had to stop because they couldn't continue or because the person they were with got sick. And they came back the following year when I came back and we would bump into each other on the trail.
That's hilarious.
And it was just this sort of the stars aligned on Camino #2 that really sort of amplified the magic. And of course, our Camino family that year was the opposite of what you might ever expect. We sort of fell in with this young gap year British kids, which isn't anything that you would sort of pick as your group, but man, did we have a heck of a time. We were sort of like the two old guys to these young kids.
It's funny because kind of like the same thing happens to me on my Camino Portuguese. There was the really old crowd, or these kids from Madrid that were just finished the school, going to college, and I had a blast. They had a blast, but it's just weird how the Camino match ups. It doesn't matter the age, where you're from, whatever. It just happens.
Absolutely not. And you surprise yourself with what you learn from all these people. And that's what, when you were talking about the Camino Franceses being the way to start, I was nodding in agreement, because that's where you meet the most diverse.
Yeah.
That's where you meet people that in your ordinary daily interactions, you would never have a conversation.
And it's the place that allows you to have the more interactions, the more places to visit, the more albergues, the more pilgrims, the more everything, because it's so full of albergues, bars, people, that makes everything so easy to happen. If you go in the Portuguese, my first 3 days, I was almost walking by myself. I'm like, I know in your many Caminos, you have Via de la Plata, whatever. Sometimes you don't even see a pilgrim. In the Camino Aragonés, I was by myself. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but you go looking for different things, no?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm very much the people person oriented side of it. I prefer to have as many interactions, as many long conversations walking as I possibly can. Now, mind you, I like to walk alone, and I'm not big on giving lots of advice, but walking alone is one of the things that I sort of tell people, like, if you have an opportunity to take it, walk alone. There's a bar at the end of the day or in the middle of the day to catch up. There's dinner time. There's a long coffee or second coffee in the morning, but give yourself that time to be alone while you're walking, because there is something magical about this.
And I think that's the beauty of the Camino Frances, that allows you to have those times, with my family at the beginning, the mornings will be a long time. Sometimes we start chatting, but then everyone, one will be praying, the other one will be listening to music, the one will be walking faster. And we know that by about 9:30 in the first bar, we will again, catch up, have breakfast. And then it was kind of like social time. Then arriving to the albergue, the relaxed time, some will go riding, some will go nap, so others will go for a drink. And you have to find and know that you have to have those times. As you say, it's mandatory to at least one day of one full stage alone, because it's miracles happen when you are walking with people. When you are by yourself, there's other kinds of miracles that can happen.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So when all of these, of taking your friends from Ohio, back to Spain and again became something that's like, maybe I can write a book, maybe I can do an app. When was, that extra thing start coming into your head?
About year 3 or year 4. I think it was 2008, the winter of 2008. I had moved to Iceland, and I was living alone in a flat, and I needed something to do with the long winters there. And that's when I started the website. And like I said, it was just an exercise, and I needed a topic, right? It's like writing a term paper. It's got to be 50 pages long, but what is the topic? And I said, I'm going to make a website, but I need something meaningful. And on my shelf was the notebooks that I'd sort of been gathering. And so that's what I picked up, and that's what I started hammering away at.
And what was the idea of the first website? It was kind of like a blog. It was kind of like a guide.
No, it was sort of a catalog of distances and places, and where were the pharmacies, where were the hotels and the albergues, and what could you count on when you got there. Basically everything that you'd want in a guidebook, but in web form, although not nearly as useful as you'd ever want it to be. And now it's, of course, I think probably pretty useful. Even if you have a smartphone and an internet connection, you can use the website to great effect. But that's when it started. And I've just been sort of plugging away at it. And although I was living in Iceland, I would sort of escape to Spain for the summer to walk and to learn something new. And when it came to like making something like meaningful out of it, like, could I be a guidebook author? The thought had never occurred to me until I met an actual bona fide guidebook author. It was 2010. I met Rebecca Scott. Do you know Rebecca?
Yeah, I know Rebecca.
All right. Hello, Rebecca, if you're listening.
Yeah, and I have to
she's
go
an
her to interview her. So it's on the list of people to be interviewed. One of the famous names of the Camino for sure.
Yeah. Rebecca is an absolute rock star of a hospitalera and pilgrim
Mhm.
and an author. That's her first passion, I would probably guess. And she wrote several guidebooks. And when I met her, now mind you, she's from Pennsylvania, but living in Palencia. She's in the heart of the Meseta. And I met her at her house in the wintertime. And she had mentioned, well, I was just walking the Camino de Invierno. And I didn't, because I'm writing this guidebook for it, but I never finished it because she had gotten some sort of food poisoning or gastrointestinal thing.
Mhm.
She said, would you like to go and walk the second half of it and finish the guide? And I just thought to myself, well, hang on now. That's a really good idea. And if somebody of her sort of pedigree is suggesting it to me, then I think, okay, maybe I can do this. And so that's exactly what I did in 2010. I went and I walked the Invierno and finished that guidebook. And now, 10 years later, I'm going to republish that guidebook. But that was the very first one that sort of kicked off, hey, you know what? You can write in a way that other people will want to read and will trust you as a source. So 2 years later, the apps came. And, I did it backwards. I started with apps, and now I'm doing books and maps. And that's as a result from meeting other Camino authors who said, you know what? Not everyone wants to carry their phone. And I said, actually, yeah, you're right. So I sort of moved into that direction, half by necessity. I needed a job, but always driven by a sense of, hey, this is good. This could be a really good, fun thing to do, and could really, help people out and show people a side of the Camino that they might not be getting from another source.
How does one goes from, photographer in the States, working in the tourism industry in Iceland, to design a web in Drupal without being a computer geek, and then getting into apps?
Wow, I think the question answers itself, right? A series of really bad decisions.
That can be the name for the next books. A series of bad decisions led me to Santiago.
Yeah, when I look back at the path that I took to get where I'm at now, and I'm not really sure where I'm at now. Many of us are sort of sitting in uncertainty.
But I think that's the beauty of, one of the things that I right now thinking of, like my path is being like, as we were talking, prior to I don't know what's my next step. And in a way I'm scared, in another way I love it, but it's thanks to the Camino that I'm on that point that I don't know what will come in 1 month, 1 year.
That's exactly it. But how we got here is anybody's guess. I made a lot of decisions which made my parents kind of go, where did we go wrong with this one?
If you follow Nate's advice, come on.
If I followed Nathan's advice, I would be in a much different place at this point. But it's been a worthwhile journey. And like I said before, like the Camino is sort of always in your ear. Mm-hmm. It's not, how do I say this without trying to convey the way that it feels inside? It's not the motivating factor, but it's sort of like this little fairy in your ear that goes, yeah, but that's not how it would be done on the Camino.
In a way, for me, it happens that every time that I think, business or personal of everything, if I can think, I'm thinking of a design, a website, I'm like, oh, this can be applied to the Camino this way. I'm helping a company that is creating this, product or look, and I'm like, oh, this market can be this. I'm like, everything has a way to kind of like prone or move a little towards anything Camino, Camino Santiago or any other Camino, or I don't know if that happens to you also.
Oh, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And I will never forget the things that happened to me on the first Camino when I left the Camino family and started having to do double days. Tomas and Manharin doesn't know me, but I know him very well because of the meal that he gave me that late evening, which got me down the other side of that mountain. you know, it's that sort of hospitality, that sense of constantly giving, that, you know, I'm a terrible businessman because I don't look at the bottom line. I just go, what's best for the customer? What's best for the pilgrim who just walked through the door?
Yeah, and you're like, and I
And
still have to pay all the bills, you know. And that's one of the things that a lot of people think, you know, that people that we do kind of like a little business in the Camino, we are making the big bucks. I'm like, I have expenses a ton. I
yeah.
don't know how much I'm making, but that's why I love to meet people like you and, you know, Rebecca and all the other people that have little businesses in the Camino, because the business is not what motivates you to be there. The business is a service to pilgrims and a way of surviving. And, you know, I like to remind everyone, you know, now that there's all these GoFundMe campaigns, this all save the municipal and the public albergues. And I love to remember that there's people like you that have a business that is just based on the Camino, and you are putting your life, your love and everything. And if you need to go and help, even it's just an email, or, you know, you can help in any way, to everyone to remember, and just give a call, send a message to that person that, you know, has a guide book or opened the albergue for you, or has a little bar that you remember. Everybody's
it's true.
struggling, and just having that message is, because at the end we are here for the love of the Camino. It's not for, if we want a business, probably you will be, you know, with your photography skills and your web designs right now, you can make a living perfectly, but you're still trying to provide a service for the Camino.
That's it. That's it. It's not business as usual, but it's still what I'm going to do. I'm not changing the course. I'm sort of tightening the belt for a year, and looking forward to this new year. I am doing new things, but it's always along the Camino. You know, the photography is making a comeback. If anybody's followed my Instagram, they would have seen in the last couple of years, I've been taking portraits of pilgrims.
And that's one of the things that I, you know, we'll keep it for later, because that's one of the things that I love about your whole. And there's just a couple people that is doing what you were doing, so we'll go back to the photography because I love it, and they're so you those photographies that they're incredible.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to do this summer if I get the chance, and certainly next summer. I'm expanding my creative prowess there, because it's been sort of pushed behind me too far. I am a photographer at heart, and I'd like to get back into that. And, you know, when you're writing Camino guidebooks, it's this sort of thing that has a shelf life, right? It expires in the minds of pilgrims every 12 months. When is the new book coming out?
Yeah.
What's the date on the cover
release?
of the book?
Yeah, the new season.
Yeah. And the pandemic has really sort of throttled that whole way of thinking. There's no such thing as a 2021 Wise Pilgrim Guide, or John Brierley Guide for that matter. And the daily routine that is that job of sort of staying in contact with hospitaleros and keeping emails going, or the phone calls going, to make sure that you've got the most up-to-date information, or going and walking it as much as you can.
Yeah.
All of that went away. And what I'm finding this spring, because I'm in it now, is it's really hard to get that machine turning again.
It is. That's one of the things that I also, you know, why you and I've been trying to keep a list of things and trying to get in touch with people, and the uncertain times that await for us here in Spain.
It doesn't work.
People is so scared of giving a date or saying that they're going to open, or even if they're going to open, that I think, you know, the 2021 guide will write itself once people start walking again. But there's not going to be, I don't think even this year or even next year. I'm like, we're going to have 2 years of weird situations, because, you know, the economy here in Spain, I think, is going to struggle in a couple of months when there's no more help, no more, and people, you know, the banks are going to start needing the payments, and a lot of this business, it's a huge investment monthly if you don't have any income.
That's it. And so what I did is, I sort of, in my process of getting in touch with the hospitaleros, I sort of recognized that hesitancy, right? That uncertainty that you just mentioned. And it occurred to me that my job, which was historically give the best information you can, has changed. And that method of give the best information is no longer something that you actually can do right now. And what's worse, that if I try to do that, I'm leading pilgrims astray, and I'm causing a lot of stress. Because, like you say, nobody knows when they're going to open. Nobody knows if they're going to open. Nobody knows if pilgrims are coming back. But the general feeling, and I think anybody who's been around the Camino long enough to sort of feel this in their bones, is that if an albergue can open, it will open. Yeah. There aren't any hospitaleros out there going, nah, I'm just not feeling it this year.
If there are hospitaleros from the Camino, they are just waiting to open their doors.
They're eager to open. And is it going to be as many pilgrims as it was in 2019? No, it's not. It's also not going to be as many beds. There's always going to be as many beds as are necessary for pilgrims. Nobody's going to be turned away. Nobody's ever been turned away.
No.
Right? There's always a bed for you. It might not be in that albergue, which you read on the internet is the best one that you've got to go to on your Camino. It's going to be the right one for you that night. And so I've sort of dialed back a lot of the COVID related changes to the apps that I made last year, basically to say that message. Don't worry if it's open or closed. There's going to be a sign on the door when you get there directing you to exactly what it is that you need. There isn't going to be a town where there isn't a bed. There isn't going to be a situation where pilgrims are just left stranded. The community on the ground will pull together like they've always done. And
like we did last year with the whole pandemic. I'm like, probably you like me were having messages from pilgrims from all over the world, walking, being stuck in Spain, and no one ever. And the beauty of this is nothing has happened in the Camino. There's no been one pilgrim really. There's no been an issue with an albergue or anything. Like pilgrims have been going back and forth. You can agree with coming to Spain to walk. You can disagree. That's up to each pilgrim. That's one of the things that, if the Camino is open, you are more than following the law that was at the time. And I think this year will be the same. The Camino will finally slowly get back together, but there's going to be a lot of uncertain things. So the only thing you need is, just people like you and me, and know that we are writing in one message, one call, or one email, and we will do our best to help anyone that is needing help.
That's right. And the majority of my emails come from the albergue side, but, for anybody listening, it's on my website. Or you can link it in the podcast.
Yeah, and it will be, all the links will be in the podcast to your, Instagram, your website, and everything. And that's the beauty. I think one of the things that I love the most about this year of pandemic that has allowed me to connect to a lot of people that I didn't know were in the Camino. Probably that older crowd that has been there longer, that is not probably, mangling in the Instagram or the stuff, more the Facebook crowd. But it's such a community, that has been pushing, everybody and helping everybody to make it this year.
Yeah. It's been a real team effort, and we're not quite through it.
Nope.
In a strange way. And in fact, many of us are kind of looking at this 1 year anniversary and going, man, is it going to be another year? We don't believe so. And
yeah,
and we're all very optimistic. And I miss the Americans. The Ohioan in me just goes, where's
all those guys with the right accent?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's been a year, and so anybody who's listening, where's this being recorded from? I'm on the Camino Portugues, halfway between Santiago and Padrón, and I'm just a stone's throw from the Camino, and I walk the neighborhood daily. And the best, most beautiful stretch of my daily walk is part of the Camino, and for a year now, I haven't seen a pilgrim.
I know.
On that entire stretch.
From this window, there's the big citadel of Pamplona when you cross over to start going up to Cizur and the Monte del Perdón. And I run there. I used to run to the Monte del Perdón, and I haven't seen a pilgrim this year. And I've seen a couple of pilgrims. It's been weird. There's been a couple of stranger people coming in. And I have a really good friend with an albergue here that, has a couple of pilgrims. But the whole, one of the things that I say that always, is my biggest nightmare living in Pamplona is that I see pilgrims every day going to Santiago. I go to work, I go for a coffee, and I see the people with a smile, the backpack on the third day, those families, and I'm like, I want to go too.
I had never really considered that perspective before because I've never lived anywhere but Santiago.
It's horrible. But yeah. But for me, for you, it's the last day. But for me, it's the beginning. It's when they go with that big smile, they're crossing. I'm in my car. I start, and also my friends are tired of this. I'm like, we go to the bar at Tapas and we play the game, homeless or pilgrim. I'm like, which one is this guy? Is that a homeless or a pilgrim? And I try to levitate when we're line there, isn't it's there? A fine line sometimes, too fine sometimes. But we're at the bar and I'm with my friends and they're like, hey, you are with us here, not with the pilgrims. And I always ended up trying to chat with the pilgrims, giving some advice. and that's the thing that you say at the beginning, the Camino keeps calling you, and I'm always suffering that call living in Pamplona. So it's beautiful, but as you say, I can't wait to have, finally the pilgrims, the people coming, the listening to those accents, the people from the States, people from Africa, people from Germany, Italy, all that vibe that keeps, and that is also is going to help so many people in the Camino to look finally at the bright side, because times in Spain have been tough, and a lot of people has lost. We are lucky ones that I haven't lost anyone close to me, but a lot of people have lost close ones, and it's just elderly, even young people like even your age. So I always say to everyone, if the sooner you can come, but don't. The Camino is always going to be there. If it has to be 2021, it will be 2021. If not 2022, and if not 2023, the Camino has always been there. The Camino will continue being there. And I think that also this new era that we live is going to help everyone to spread more in the Camino. That's what I hope, and to discover and to maybe change a little bit the way we were, more in the old days. I think a lot of people were asking. I think now we're, go back a little bit maybe to the old days where people were more, thank you and giving thanks for things instead of asking, hospitaleros, albergues and hotels and everything. It was one of the things that I realized last summer when we were in Santiago, and I talked to everyone from the hotels and the albergues, is like, we are tired of Spaniards. They are so demanding. And I'm like, what? Everybody told me the same thing. They were tired. They want the people from the States, from Canada, from Australia. They're more welcoming, more, more thankful. So know that Spain, to all of the ones listening, others, Spain is waiting for you.
Yeah, for sure. And, before we started recording, we were talking about looking on the bright side of things and what are those things that are on the horizon. And my next door neighbors are missionaries, and we talk frequently about things, the positive side of stuff. And one of the things we were talking about a few days ago was the Camino as a means to answer questions that are otherwise very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
In an ordinary year, what do I do when I've left my job, my career path, or when a spouse has died, or when, my kids have gone off to college, or I'm getting ready to go out of college, but I don't really feel like I have a path.
Yeah.
A lot of these sort of big life moments that bring people to the Camino and answer a lot of questions for them, or give them some insights about themselves, which help them to find the answers. All of that in a post-pandemic world, I think, is going to become even more and more necessary because of the amount of grief, the grief and the loneliness and the feeling of, I don't really know where I fit into this world, is much more expansive than it's ever been. People that have been locked inside their small apartments or who've lost loved ones. And I think the Camino now really stands ready to answer those questions, or to give people the time and the space and the long distances and the bright hot sun to answer those questions for themselves. And that is the thing that sort of gives me the most hope. Like you said, if it's this summer or next summer, people are going to be sort of unraveling the effects of the last year for some time, and the Camino is always going to be here for them. And I encourage people to take advantage of that, to use that as a really good tool. And I think I said I don't like to give a lot of advice along the way, but there's been one thing that's sort of been bugging me in the last couple of years about this. And as a Camino author, I'm sort of guilty of it myself, but this sort of over preparation for the Camino. And I don't know if that's going to change in the new era ahead. But for the people that are coming with these things, and they are sort of trying to figure out what the Camino is going to give to them, I sort of look at it from the philosophy of don't wonder. Don't try to figure it out before you get here.
Because
just come and let that narrative answer itself when you're here. Because this is not the ship that you can steer. This is a thing that you can come and experience under the power of your own two legs, and which will do what you need it to do. And you don't know what that thing is.
I know, I agree with you. And I think, that's one of the things that it pisses me the most when I see it, Facebook or anywhere, in the Camino, there's anything there's nothing close to one size fit all. Talking about albergues, ways of doing the Camino, preparing the Camino, is your own Camino from the day that you discover the Camino. Whatever
It
you do is
always
going to be
has
your
been.
own journey. It always has been. There is no wrong. If you decided to prepare every day, even the days that you want to have restaurant, do it if it's what you feel correct. If you want to go with boots, hiking barefoot, if you want to use correos and don't carry your backpack because you have to, or because you just want to, if you want to sleep in a 5-star hotel because you can to and you want to, that's your own Camino. And as you say, just be sure that if you are making it with an open heart, everything will change once you start walking.
That's it. That's it. That's it. It's not so much the how, but the why. Let the why be answered on the Camino.
And being open, it doesn't matter how and why you can. We all, as you say, we all come with that little backpack of things that need to be solved. Everyone, that's one thing when people say, "Oh, I'm doing the Camino for sport reasons," or the people that go on a bike. I'm like, no, everyone is looking for something. If you're coming to Santiago, there's so many paths in the world that are much better, beautiful infrastructure, anything than the Camino de Santiago. But if you're coming to Santiago, you're searching. And the Camino calls you. You don't decide to go to the Camino. The Camino calls you in a way, and then you are like, okay, yes, sir, I will do it.
That's it. That's funny that you say that, because I'm very much of the same philosophy, and I sort of bristle when I hear people say there's too many pilgrims on the Camino. I just think to myself, but they're all answering that call. They've all, whether it's a movie or a book or a comedian or something that, somebody like me who goes home with Camino, come on, let's go do this. They're all coming. And I feel like if everybody in the world could be part pilgrim or could take that experience home with them, we would live in a much better.
I have the same answer when people are like, there's tour companies getting to people in the Camino. And like some of those tour companies are people that love the Camino trying to make a living with something they love. Some others, they're a company. But I always say, what is better? If someone's discovered the Camino for a week, or for them not to ever discover the Camino. The other day I was interviewing a pilgrim, Alex. You probably know him, Alex.
Yeah, from Fresco Tours. Yeah.
No, Alex from he's a pilgrim. He's living here in the Basque Country, but I know the one you say from Fresco Tours. He's been a pilgrim for many years. Also, he's super active in the Facebook, and he was saying, I went to the Camino as a tourist. I finished as a pilgrim.
Absolutely.
And I believe that that's the truth for everyone. So no one has the right for anything, and there is no right or wrong in the Camino, unless a couple of things that, we have to fight clearly with those. Yeah. But other than that.
Earlier I talked about sort of the apprehensions of having decided to do too much Camino for my first Camino, doing the whole Camino. And that's a perfect case of what you're talking about, the right way, the wrong way, the highly criticized way. For example, people that start at the last 100 kilometers, those are the people, and I've spoken to many of them over the years, because that's a stretch of the Camino I know well, and is where I had my portrait project going, where people start because they didn't have the time or the courage or the money to do the whole Camino, or all of them. But the courage can be solved. And a lot of the people that I spoke to said, you know what? This is just the first week. I'm coming back because now I understand what it's about.
And really also and watching all that people that goes longer and that look at you weirdly and that smell and the same feeling that we have from them, I guess they have for us. And if you plant that little seed, that's one of the little things that I was making numbers. 65% of the pilgrims that go to the Camino repeat the Camino. I'm like, that's incredible. I don't think there's any tourism place in the world that has those numbers.
I can't imagine so. So yeah, I'm certainly in agreement with come, do it in your way, and ignore the naysayers.
And something will happen. You don't even know what is going to happen, but something will happen.
That's the part that the people like you and me go, yes, it's going to happen, and you're not going to know what it is, and you'll never be able to predict it, and it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. In your life, was the website, the guides, but the photography is what always motivates you and calls you. Where are you going with the new portrait program? And everybody, for the ones that don't know you and they want to picture you, if you have seen a picture of a group of pilgrims or just a one pilgrim with a black background and a black and white, we are talking about Michael.
Yeah. So that was a project that I started in, well, sort of kicking around in my head in 2013, 2014. It took seed with an idea that I had to go out to the Pyrenees and document pilgrims coming over the pass on day one, and to sort of spend, 3 weeks out on the mountaintop, capturing as many images as I can, as many people that would be willing to stand in front of me, I would do. And then the thought was zoom ahead to Santiago and catch them coming into town, catch them in Monte de Gozo or somewhere near enough, and sort of do before and after Camino portraits, which is still something that's sort of bouncing around in my head, but it's logistically a much more complicated
You
thing.
know that I'm in Pamplona and you are over there.
I know. Are you a photographer? Can I put
I
you to
love.
work out there?
I used to be a Nikon, but I don't think I can be as good as you. But I have a couple of friends that have worked in the photography business, so
It could
maybe
be a very interesting.
We shall talk about it later.
So I started here in the area of Arthur, so the sort of penultimate day of the Camino Frances. And I should preface this with saying I am not a portrait photographer, or I was not when I started this. It's in fact the sort of the niche of photography that I've always avoided with a passion. It's the kind of thing that
Really?
I never felt comfortable. Yeah, I never felt comfortable directing people to do what you'd want them to do to capture a nice portrait. But I love pilgrims, and I can speak the pilgrim language. I can connect to pilgrims on a level that's genuine. It's a point. It's a point that we have in common that is irrefutable. So I went for it, and I started this little thing in an old worn-out house, and it went well. It was just a couple weeks in the summer, and the following year, I found myself in the need to create sort of a job for myself, and I ended up in the forest on the way to Finisterre with some studio lights and a backdrop and a table full of cookies and coffee, and pilgrims would sort of come tromping down the woods and see me and go, "What is this guy up to?" And we would just get to talking, and the talking part was sort of the magical part of it. And in many ways, I was doing the portraits, but what I was really enjoying personally was the talking, was the sort of getting the stories out of pilgrims. And we were just talking about what motivates people to do the Camino, answering those questions. On that first adventure of photographing in the woods, I have two good stories. One was a German fellow who was a book publisher who sort of gave me the push towards making books. He was the one that said, "No, you can do it. If you've got information, don't worry about the actual process. That's all manageable." And the other was another German, surprisingly, this little old lady. And she told me the story because we were talking about, why do you walk the Camino? So I'm taking a little detour from the photo project here to tell this story, but it might be entertaining. And of course, there's maybe 5 or 6 of us sharing these stories about what really brought you on the Camino. She says, "Well, I've always wanted to walk the Camino, not for any spiritual or religious reasons, because I'm German and I just wanted to conquer a long trail. But I had a career, and so I didn't walk the Camino." And I always said, "Well, when you retire, walk the Camino." And she said, "And then I retired and I didn't walk the Camino. And the next year, I didn't walk the Camino. And the next year, I didn't walk the Camino. But now this year, I've decided to walk the Camino, and I've walked all the way. And now I've left Santiago, and I'm on my way to Finisterre. And as I'm standing with the 6 of you, now I know why I've walked the Camino." And it was that sort of like really intense point of clarity from a perfect stranger, and the look on her face of sort of just having put it all together. She's done with the Camino. She's left Santiago, and she had that light bulb moment of, this is why I didn't walk it before, for all of these years, and until right now, it's all come together. And so these are these moments that I sort of set out to kind of capture, and I haven't done it yet. They're all in my brain, but the portrait project is sort of going to grow into, it's not a podcast, don't you worry.
The more the better. I'm like, right now, yesterday I was talking with someone, they have someone else with a podcast. I'm like, I will interview. That's, my whole idea of this is the stories of the people. That's what
I,
I love the
I
most of the
tease you, but
Camino. And I love to talk with people because that's the best. And the more, the better. There is always a different point of view. There's some people that will like my voice or hate it or the way I do it. I don't have a way of doing things. So this was just out of, a lot of people ask me, why you do start YouTube? I'm like, I don't want to be a YouTuber. I don't like editing video. It's too much time. But talking is
yeah,
great because I love talking. It's so easy.
that's it. And what I've learned from that day in the forest is that there's a lot of stories out there. And what I also learned when I brought the project back I can't say last summer, it's now 2019, was that there are a lot of pilgrims out there that get to Santiago and don't really know what to do. They've got a lot of ideas in their heads. They've got a lot of things they need to talk about, and in the vein of people over preparing for the Camino, the sort of the pendulum swings to the other side at the end of the Camino, and there isn't enough post Camino care, enough resources for pilgrims to sort of unpack the experience or even to talk about it.
No, it is the worst moment in life because, as you say, everybody's looking for that illumination moment in the Plaza do Obradoiro or just arriving to Finisterre, and sometimes it's not going to happen.
It's not there for many
Sometimes
people.
You can have it many days earlier, but a lot of, as you say, I think there's the hardest part of the Camino right now is the uncovering and processing, unwinding all of the stuff that happened to you in the Camino.
Yeah. And I think that problem is even worse for the sort of secular crowd, the people that don't have a religious organization or a pastor or a reverend or somebody in the church to go to sort of, or they didn't come to talk through it, or because they didn't even come with those things to talk through. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is to start capturing the stories of those people and as least intrusive of a way as possible. And if I can record it, even better. If it's something that they can sort of sit in a space by themselves and talk about it might, maybe with a small list of questions to sort of get their brains going about it. It might be a really good opportunity for them to give a little closure to the Camino.
At least a guide and a little path to that.
Yeah, I think without overthinking it too much, that the reason a lot of people go to Finisterre and the reason a lot of people come back to the Camino is because they never sort of wrapped up their first Camino. Now, there's a joy of inexpensive summer holidays and a great crowd. But I sort of feel like there's the opportunity, if you do it perfectly well, that one Camino is enough for a lifetime.
Yeah, but I agree with you. A lot of people, the first Camino opens a lot of gates and doors and caminos. I guess when you arrive to Santiago or Finisterre is that when you realize that the Camino starts over there. And then you walk many other caminos to answer the questions that arise you into that first Camino.
That's right. Because they, at least in my very unprofessional psychology, they went unanswered.
And sometimes that is good because the Camino doesn't have all the answers, and that's what sometimes the Camino teach you.
Absolutely not. The Camino doesn't really have any answers. The Camino is just the opportunity for you to find them in yourself. And I think that a lot of people that get to the cathedral and are sort of underwhelmed and then continue to finish theirs because they've sort of realized that the joy of it all was inside of them the whole time. That they weren't walking to see some gilded altar in Santiago or the relics of some long deceased saint. They were walking for what's in their heart, and they didn't even know it the whole way.
Yeah.
But as soon as they get there, when they get underwhelmed, they go, you know what? I'm going to walk a few more days, because they realize that's where the joy is. The joy is in them pushing themselves and being with themselves during the day. It has no bearing on the destination we can talk about pilgrimage as having a destination all we want, but I think that the overwhelming majority of pilgrims, the satisfaction they get is in the daily effort that they put into it.
And I always say the pilgrimage is not where you're going, not where you're heading, not how you dress, is what is inside here, and when you go what you're going through. So yeah.
And the sooner that you realize that as a pilgrim, the more days of pure bliss that you will walk, I think. Totally. Both on the Camino and off the Camino.
So what about the guides, the apps? Is there anything new coming up for the new Sacobeo, the new year, or you just gonna focus yourself and now in this more visual project?
Well, there are updates coming because there are many new changes that would otherwise be printed, right? This has been the year where I've gotten a record number of emails saying, hey, I'm now the hospitalero, or I'm the new owner of such and such an albergue. A lot of people have just given up the business, and the new guard is swept in. So there's a load of new telephone numbers and app updates, and a couple closures and a couple openings. And so that'll sort of go out in a PDF form for the book people. I've been learning a bit more cartography, so I'm making more maps of the Camino. Maps.
And you have a new one, no? That's been just released a little bit ago.
I did. I made a Jacobeo map with some new tips and tricks that I've learned about making maps. And in April, I've got another one coming, which is a more detailed and much bigger version of what's already a big map. So it's the bigger map. It'll be about twice as big. And I have other things that were prepared for this year, but and I think you and I talked about them last summer, things which I've been really eager to get out into the market, but there isn't a market for them.
I have that list of little things that have to be crossed and all of those ideas, and that book of Camino ideas that is just, there's been no market. Also, there's been no point of trying to make anything right now, and there's been also so many other stuff that is keeping us busy that for myself I didn't even have time to work on those. So hopefully this year something will come out eventually.
Yeah, I'm really conscientious every time I put ink on paper that I'm using up resources, and at the moment I have a spare bedroom full of books. I don't want to recycle them, and I don't want to reprint and throw them away. I would like to keep them in inventory and do PDFs, and the same goes with the new stuff. I'm not going to make it until I know pilgrims are coming back. It'll be a really nice surprise for those who are looking for something new, and guidebooks along the way. Well, I can't really talk about it. You know what I'm talking about. if I give too much away, I give
Don't
too
give
much
too much.
away. And
there's too many people listening. But we'll invite everyone, to go and also use those books, and as I was saying before, even if you just want to read a little bit about the Camino, just help someone that loves the Camino and has been taking care of many pilgrims and a lot of people, as a way of helping. I always say that it's better to provide a service just to give money. A lot of people feel that better. So they know that you have a ton of maps over there that they can go to your website and the books, and we'll put the links on Instagram and on Facebook and on our website too, so you can go and check them. If not, wisepilgrimguides.com, and you have all the information there. So we can wait to see many other projects, and we can see you here and probably hike that first day. I think, we don't know, probably one hikes back to Roncesvalles. Maybe we can try it, but I think right now it's illegal. So maybe I will ask a friend for a ride.
Well, when I see you next, I have to tell you those stories because they were an adventure. Hitchhiking in the early 2000s, you can imagine what the political climate was in Pamplona.
Of course. And one of my first ideas for the podcast was to record the podcast while I was walking with the pilgrims, and I have all the gear, and my whole idea was to go on the Camino and record the stories of the pilgrims as we walk. So maybe you can be one of the first ones that we can remember that hitchhiking while walking from Roncesvalles.
Yeah, absolutely. I would welcome that. And in fact, one thing that we could do, speaking of that, and the other thing that I had in my mind is, let's find another trip. Let's find another route. Let's go to the north of Pamplona, to the Olvidado, and walk a section of a Camino that is new to both of us and experience it for the first time.
That would be great. You know what? I'm just waiting as soon as they let me out of Pamplona, where I'm going.
Where to?
To the Canaries.
To
the Camino in Gran Canaria. It's in my mind since I don't know when, and right now with the weather and everything that has been going on, I just want 5 days of walking and 3 days of doing nothing at the beach. And also,
So
being
now-
able to discover that Camino that is kind of like new, not the so Camino, is more of backpacking, but also there's no albergues, it's kind of like Airbnbs and hotels. So it's one of those mix that is still people, not, but it's calling me. I don't know why, but it's calling me right now.
Answer the call. That's it. That's all you can do. When the Camino says, hey, have you heard of me? Like on mine first. I don't know what it was, but the call came.
Mm-hmm.
The call has come to you, and the Canaries are calling.
And I was
I'm
supposed
afraid
to be
I can't
going
get
to the Cumano Codo last year, but it didn't happen. And I was going to the Via Lauretana in Italy. It didn't happen also. So I'm like, at least maybe the Canaries are closer and cheaper.
Are you going to replan that trip? Because that's something that's, I think, would
The
be
Via Lauretana
an
for
amazing
sure,
adventure.
and the Cumano, the whole idea is we were going with my mom on a trip to Vietnam. You know, she's as a family, and the whole idea was, you know, to jump from there to Japan and do the Cumano, just taking the time. But the Cumano has been in my head for a long time, and I love the Asian, and it's one of those that I'm gonna make it. You know, I invite all my pilgrim friends, all the ones that I talk like you know, it's Claudio, anyone that is coming right down. Like, if we had a bunch of freaks like us and go the Cumano, I would love it. And even though I will go alone, but that's one of the Caminos that I seen pictures, I seen, and it's like the one in the Canaries. It's so different, but at the same time, it's as you say, it calls you. Plus, the Cumano has the whole thing that is the dual pilgrimage, that has the brotherhood with the Camino, and they are the only two that they are being UNESCO worldwide. So hopefully soon, but that one is a little more expensive than going to the Canaries.
It's true.
It's a little bit.
That's a true story.
But for now, just walking up to the Monte Perdón, that's cheap. You know, it just cost me one coffee and the pincho de tortilla and the gas, so it's perfect.
What is that like on a daily or a frequent basis to walk up that mountain? Because as a pilgrim, you sort of see it.
For me, it takes me running about an hour and 20 minutes with a little stop at the top and running. Walking.
From Pamplona.
No, I leave the car at the bottom, at the base of the trail. What is it, the big sign? Because from Pamplona, it's all road and stuff. I'm like, when I go over there, I just want to go trail running. Some days, my normal route running, it follows the Camino from the Ciudadela, from the Citadel, from the park. I go down and I go up to Cizur, and from Cizur, I go back to Pamplona. That's about 10K, and that takes me less than an hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. But up to the Perdón and back, that's about an hour and a half.
It's nice that there's a food truck up there for you then.
It's not anymore.
No.
Not even the bar is open. The bar has been closed the whole year. Yeah. Normally, I usually stop at the way down at the little bar at the famous church where Martin's in a stop. The family that runs the bar is super nice. And on my way back this year, you know, to get my tummy back into, I just go up, eat a granola bar, and then go down. I go look like I'm giving, you know, bracelets to the pilgrims. Hey, I have this. I have. Oh, wow, thank you. And then like they continue, and I have to say bye.
Pilgrims who know this trail are sort of either cringing or making a face at the idea of running up that alto.
And it's funny also because a lot of the people, you know, because they are still in that early stage of the Camino, they're not Camino freaks yet. As when you get them into Santiago, they're like, oh, at the beginning for me, like, who is this freak that is giving us, you know, bracelets and just talking about the Camino and the amazing life of the Camino? I'm like, a long time ago when all this started, I was thinking about an app for the Camino. I interviewed like 500 pilgrims in Pamplona, all hated the idea, and it took me down. I'm like, but again, I wasn't, you know, preaching to the proper business.
That's it.
It wasn't my crowd. It wasn't my clientele, my buyer persona. You know, I had to go to Santiago and do the same at the end of the Camino. So, but that led me a lot.
There are things at the beginning of the Camino that don't fit in your brain as a pilgrim.
Not at all.
They don't
change.
You don't. But by the end of the Camino, you go, it's completely normal that somebody hands me a flower and asks me to say a prayer when I get to Santiago.
Or like your map. Like if someone tells me in Pamplona that I'm going to buy a map that is, 30, 50 years, whatever, at the beginning, I'm like, why? And then at the end, I will pay for whatever, send it to my home, print it with my friends' names, take a picture. It changed also, it's the whole aura of getting to Santiago and everything, but it's incredible how it changes. It was quite a discovery how people change from Pamplona, that they're like, I'm just here walking, who knows?
So what you're saying is I do need to start the photo project out in the Pyrenees.
But the people, as I said, when I was preaching to all these people, they were like, the whole idea was to make an app where you can, keep all your pictures and create a book, and at the end print it. I will print the book for you with all your memories, because my biggest problem from the community is that I have so many photos with my phone, but I don't have a way of putting them in a beautiful way or collected or anything, because I don't have the taste, I don't have the time. So they're still all on my hard drive. finally I took the time and I print a book, and I have now one book of my Caminos. But if I had a way to make that easy for every pilgrim. But in Pamplona, I asked them, how much will you be willing to pay for a printed book of your whole Camino? Like, I don't want to print anything. I don't want to pay anything. And for me, my feeling when I arrived to Pamplona back from the Camino, and I found out that I have 1,500 pictures that I have to go through and decide which ones I like, I will pay thousands of euros if I have them to make that, pain go away and make something easy. And so still in my head, one of those, I have my ideas book of businesses, but maybe something we can get back together. Who knows?
It's funny now, right? Everyone has the ability to take a photo at an instant, but they never leave the phone. And if you grew up in an era where you had to take the film to the photo lab and you got paper things back
and getting there and watching there and I'm going to make a copy of this one.
Yeah. And you don't know what you're missing if you've never experienced that.
And also you value, you have 12, 24 or 36 or 48 shots to make. I'm like, it's not like, oh, another one. No. They were priceless.
Yeah.
Plus it was expensive. If you have a good ISO and a good, film, it was expensive. Plus also developing the film, it wasn't cheap at all.
But and for all that effort, you appreciated and enjoyed them more. And you're not wrong when you say that they should get printed into a book form. I hope more people sort of follow that. I think the most rewarding sort of self projects that I've seen people post on Facebook about Caminos are their sort of photo walls or photo books that they've taken the time to sit down and pick the best of the best. But
as you say, you realize about those once you have done the Camino, not when you start walking it.
That's it. You're right.
But we'll see. Many things, many projects, many things to do. So hopefully we can get our heads together and find something.
That's a common problem with those of us who are in it too much. Everything we see is Camino, and it's hard to sort of pick a project and commit to it and see it to its full potential because they're all so good and so exciting in our own brains.
That's my job is that, I teach young entrepreneurs to good business. I teach companies to develop their products. I do market studies. So for me, I'm all the time looking for something new, and I like to be jumping from one project to the other. So even with my own project, sometimes I'm like, I even have developed my website. I haven't developed I'm already thinking 20 projects ahead. But that's the beauty of the Camino, and that's the beauty why we do it for love and not for money, and anything is for the love that the Camino has. And as you say, anyone that has walked it know what we're talking about. And as I was talking yesterday with someone, if I have to explain it to you, you wouldn't get it.
That's it. It's come and experience it, right? Come and do it and answer the question for yourself, because
that's it. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much. I hope that next time we can do the podcast walking and interview you for your next projects. And I'm sure we will see each other or Santiago or in Finisterre or here in Pamplona or in some other Camino, maybe in the Canaries, maybe in Cumano. Who knows?
I would do the Cumano, but I would also cruise to Navarra as soon as they open these borders. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I'm ready. I'm also wanted to do the Baztanés or even the Camino Ignaciano, the one that goes, it's not the Camino de Santiago, but it goes from Loyola to Montserrat. That's one of the ones that I really want to do also. Different Caminos, just to get different feelings.
It's a beautiful Camino, and it has a long history. And of course, you get to spend the night in Navarrete. So I haven't walked it, but I've driven most of it.
There's not many guides about it. Maybe that's a cool project because I come from the Jesuit school, so San Ignatius has always been kind of like, so that may be a project.
Myself as well.
You see, there is always that something that gets people to. It's just crazy, the little things of the Camino.
That's a route. It's funny because there are a number of Caminos in Spain that don't end in Santiago. That is probably, well, I guess none of them are really known outside of the pilgrim community at large, but that's a really important one.
And I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. That is, because also the Jesuit and the Ignatius community in the States is huge. Once it gets going, also it's pretty beautiful. It ended up in a really cool place, Montserrat. It has a story behind of a man that walked it that is also, kind of like big everywhere, even, even for non-Catholic. So yeah, it's one of the ones that I would really love to, to develop and research more.
Yeah. As an author, I can tell you there's a dozen of them that they sort of, you say
Oh,
you've got all these plans.
I have a whole
I've
list
got the
of
same
all the
thing.
Caminos, and I
I'm
even
the
have
same. I'm the
the names registered. I have a huge list of bills that come every year for all those domain names.
It's funny because I have a list, right? I don't own the domains. I
I have
can't
a
make
couple
too
that
many
I bought.
websites. But I every time I get an email, hey, by the way, have you had any plans to make a guidebook for the Ignaciano? I go, okay, put that to the top of the list. And then the next day I'll get an email that says, what about the,
This one.
okay, put that at the top of the list. It's an endless task. And actually, I'm trying to figure out a way we'll end this now, but I'm trying to make a way that pilgrims can sort of write their own guidebooks, to build the framework for crowdsourced guides for these routes, which are never going to see huge numbers, but which see enough demand for people who just want a little bit of information. So you can walk and leave a comment on everything along the way. And the
Maybe
next guy
we are
can
creating
improve it.
a new trend, crowd mapping.
I think on the tertiary routes on the Caminos, it's a really good idea, because there's a lot of people who would like to, and a lot of communities that would welcome that kind of activity, for sure.
Well, anyway, before we bore anyone more than an hour and a half of interview, thank you so
can edit
much.
most of this out, I'm sure.
No, everything stays. That's one of the things I don't do. I only edit if things go wrong, but the whole thing, a lot of people, they told me, you should go for 45 minutes, you should go for half an hour. I'm like, the interviews is what it is. And in your case and my case, it's been an hour and a half and it's been like nothing. And we can continue for
amazing.
many, and that's the beauty of the Camino. And if people like to listen to us, they're welcome. If they don't, there is many other podcasts, many other things to do. So they are welcome also to do. So thank you very much, Michael. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
And we always say, buen camino, ultrella.
Igualmente.